Good evening, fellow financial healers, and welcome back to The Sleeping Economist. I'm your host, and tonight's gentle lesson takes us into the comforting world of compound interest, that magical financial force that literally works while you sleep. Picture this. While you're dreaming peacefully tonight, your money could be having its own little party, multiplying and growing without you having to lift a finger. It's like having the world's most reliable employee who never calls in sick, never asks for a raise, and works 24/7 without complaining. But before we begin our journey toward financial peace together, please take a moment to like this video if you find these bedtime money lessons helpful, subscribe to join our growing community of financial healers, and drop a comment to let us know where in the world you're listening tonight and what financial anxiety brought you to our little corner of economic wisdom. I always say we love sharing financial healing with you, but we love hearing about your journey even more. Now then, shall we dim the lights, settle in with whatever brings you comfort, and gently explore tonight's beautifully simple financial truth? I do hope you're prepared for some peaceful money wisdom. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. Compound interest? Really? That's about as exciting as watching paint dry, in slow motion, during a particularly boring documentary about paint. And you know what? You're absolutely right. On the surface, compound interest sounds like the financial equivalent of watching grass grow. But here's the delicious irony. It's precisely because it's so wonderfully boring that it becomes absolutely magical. You see, compound interest is like that quiet friend who never makes a fuss, never demands attention, but somehow always manages to be incredibly reliable. While other financial concepts are out there making headlines and causing drama, compound interest is contently sitting in the corner, doing its thing with the persistence of a particularly determined tortoise. Let me paint you a picture that might make you smile. Imagine your money as a particularly lazy cat, and I mean this in the most affectionate way possible. This cat doesn't want to chase mice or perform tricks. It simply wants to curl up in a sunny spot and multiply. Not literally multiply like some sort of financial feline miracle, but grows slowly, steadily, and with the kind of patience that would make a meditation master jealous. The beautiful thing about compound interest is that it doesn't care if you're wealthy or just starting out, if you're a financial genius or someone who still counts on their fingers when splitting a restaurant bill. It works the same gentle magic for everyone, like a democratic fairy godmother with a particularly good understanding of mathematics. If you're feeling a bit overwhelmed by financial concepts, take comfort in knowing that compound interest is probably the most forgiving topic in all of finance. It's not going to judge you for starting small, it's not going to abandon you if you make mistakes, and it certainly won't complain if you ignore it for a while. It's like that friend who's always there when you need them, asking nothing in return except a little time and patience. Think of compound interest as nature's way of teaching us about money. Just as a seed doesn't stress about becoming a tree overnight, your money doesn't need to transform into a fortune by next Tuesday. There's something deeply peaceful about understanding that growth, real, lasting growth, happens quietly, gradually, and with the kind of gentle persistence that makes miracles seem perfectly ordinary. For those of you who arrived here carrying financial worries, let me offer you this comfort. Compound interest is perhaps the most hopeful concept in all of economics. It whispers that small beginnings can lead to extraordinary endings, that time is on your side, and that every dollar, no matter how modest, has the potential to grow into something wonderful. And for those of you who simply enjoy learning something new as you drift towards sleep, well, you're in for a treat. We're about to explore one of the most elegant principles in finance, one that's been quietly helping people build wealth for centuries, all while being refreshingly simple to understand. So whether you're here out of curiosity, necessity, or simply because you find the gentle rhythm of learning soothing, know that you're about to discover something that could change how you think about money forever. Not in a dramatic, overnight transformation sort of way, but in the quiet, steady manner of watching a garden grow. Now that we've settled into this safe space for learning, let's gently explore what compound interest really means for you, and why it might just be the most relaxing financial concept you'll ever encounter. After all, what could be more peaceful than money that grows while you sleep? Now, if you've ever tried to explain compound interest to someone, you've probably discovered it's a bit like trying to describe the color blue to someone who's never seen the sky. It's one of those concepts that seems obvious once you understand it, but feels impossibly complex when you're first approaching it. Rather like trying to fold a fitted sheet, theoretically possible, but practically mystifying. Let me start with what compound interest actually is, and I promise to keep this gentler than a whispered lullaby. Imagine you have a magical garden where every flower that blooms creates 2 more flowers. Not immediately, mind you, that would be chaos, but slowly, naturally, over time. The original flower stays beautiful, and gradually more flowers appear around it. This is exactly how compound interest works, except instead of flowers, we're talking about money. When you save or invest money, it earns interest. That's your first flower blooming. But here's where the magic happens. That interest you earned, it starts earning its own interest too. Your money is essentially having money babies, and then those money babies grow up and have their own money babies. I know. Talking about money reproduction sounds about as romantic as discussing tax codes over candlelight dinner. But bear with me, because this is where things get wonderfully peaceful. Think of compound interest as a snowball rolling down a gentle hill. At first, it's just a small clump of snow, perhaps the size of a tennis ball. As it rolls, it picks up more snow, growing slightly larger. The bigger it gets, the more snow it can collect with each turn. Before you know it, what started as something you could hold in your hand has become something substantial enough to build a snow fort with. The beautiful part is that you don't have to push this snowball. Gravity does the work, or in our case, time does the work. You simply give it that initial gentle nudge and mathematics takes care of the rest. Let's make this even more concrete with a story that might make you smile. Imagine you're at a particularly generous bank, the kind that exists more in fairy tales than reality, and they offer you a choice. Option 1, they'll give you $1 million right now. Option 2, they'll give you 1 penny today, 2 pennies tomorrow, 4 pennies the next day, and they'll keep doubling it for 30 days. Most people, quite sensibly, would grab that $1 million faster than you can say financial security. But here's the thing, and I do hope you're sitting down for this. By day 30, that humble penny would have grown to over $5 million. That's the quiet power of compound interest, turning something as modest as a penny into something that would make lottery winners slightly jealous. Of course, real-world compound interest is far more modest than our fairy tale doubling penny, but the principle remains deliciously the same. Small amounts, given enough time, can become surprisingly substantial. It's like watching a caterpillar transform into a butterfly, except the transformation happens in your bank account instead of in a cocoon. The key word here is time. Compound interest is not the financial equivalent of a microwave dinner. It's more like slow cooking a perfect stew. You can't rush it, you can't hurry it, and you certainly can't force it to work faster by staring at it intensely. But oh, the results are worth the wait. Think of time as compound interest's best friend and most essential ingredient. Just as you can't bake a cake without heat, you can't create the magic of compound interest without the gentle passage of time. This is why compound interest is particularly kind to young people. They have the one thing that money can't buy: decades of time for their money to grow. But please don't worry if you're not 25 anymore. Compound interest doesn't discriminate based on age, and it certainly doesn't require a passport to the land of youth. Whether you're starting at 25 or 65, the principle works exactly the same way. The only difference is the timeline, and even a shorter timeline can produce wonderfully comforting results. Here's another way to think about it. Compound interest is like a gentle river that never stops flowing. At first, it might seem like just a trickle, barely noticeable as it makes its way through the landscape of your finances. But rivers, as we know, have a remarkable ability to carve grand canyons given enough time and patience. The mathematics behind compound interest is elegantly simple. Your money earns interest, and that interest gets added to your original amount. Then this new, slightly larger amount earns interest, and that interest gets added too. It's like a financial echo that keeps getting stronger instead of fading away. What makes this particularly soothing is that compound interest requires absolutely no skill on your part once you've set it in motion. You don't need to monitor it, manage it, or make complex decisions about it. It's the financial equivalent of a self-watering plant. Set it up properly, and it takes care of itself. This is perhaps why compound interest has been called the eighth wonder of the world. It's not flashy like the pyramids or dramatic like Niagara Falls. It's quietly, consistently wonderful, like a perfectly brewed cup of tea or the sound of rain on a quiet evening. As we prepare to explore real-world examples in our next chapter, let yourself feel the gentle comfort of understanding this simple truth. Compound interest is not complicated financial wizardry. It's simply money earning money, which then earns more money. In an endless, peaceful cycle of growth. Settle in a little deeper as we meet some wonderfully ordinary people who discovered the extraordinary power of compound interest. These aren't financial wizards or Wall Street tycoons, they're people just like you and me, who stumbled upon this gentle secret and let it work. It's quiet magic. Let me tell you the real-life story of Ronald Read, a chap who would have blended into any crowd without causing so much as a ripple. He worked as a gas station attendant and later as a janitor at J.C. Penney. He drove an old Toyota, shopped with coupons and wore the same coat for years. If you passed him on the street, you'd probably think, there goes a man who's just getting by. But here's the delicious twist in Ronald's story. When he passed away at age 92, he left behind an $8 million fortune. $8 million from a janitor's salary. It's the kind of story that makes you wonder if he had a secret second job as a bank robber, or perhaps discovered a particularly lucrative side hustle in diamond smuggling. The truth is far more beautiful and accessible than any dramatic heist movie. Ronald simply understood something that many people overlook. Compound interest doesn't care about your job title, your education level, or whether you wear designer suits or thrift store finds. It only cares about time and consistency. Ronald started investing small amounts of money, sometimes just $50 or $100 at a time, in dividend-paying stocks. He would reinvest the dividends, which is just a fancy way of saying he let his money's babies have babies of their own. For decades, he did this quietly, consistently, without fanfare or complicated strategies. What makes Ronald's story particularly comforting is that he didn't need to understand complex financial instruments or spend his evenings reading market reports. He simply trusted in the gentle power of compound interest and gave it the one thing it needed most: time to work its magic. Now, let me share the true story of Grace Groner, a woman whose approach to compound interest was so understated it would make a monk look flashy. Grace was a secretary at Abbott Laboratories, and in 1935 she bought 3 shares of her company's stock for $60. That's about $1,000 in today's money. Not exactly a fortune, but not pocket change either. Grace never bought another stock. She simply held on to those 3 shares and reinvested the dividends. When she passed away at age 100, those $60 had grown to $7 million. $7 million from a single modest purchase, and the patience to let compound interest do what it does best. What's particularly endearing about Grace's story is that she lived simply throughout her life, not because she was poor, but because she understood the difference between wealth and flashiness. She had discovered that true financial security comes not from earning enormous sums, but from allowing modest sums to grow into something extraordinary. These stories might sound like financial fairy tales, but they're beautifully real. They remind us that compound interest is the great equalizer in finance. It doesn't require special connections, insider knowledge, or even particularly large starting amounts. It simply requires the wisdom to begin and the patience to wait. Let me tell you about another hero of compound interest, though this one you might recognize. Warren Buffett, often called the greatest investor of all time, bought his first stock at age 11. Not because he was a financial prodigy, but because he understood early that time was his greatest asset. Today, he's worth over $100 billion, and he attributes most of his wealth not to brilliant stock picks, but to compound interest working over many, many decades. Buffett once said that his wealth could be explained by 3 things: living in America, some lucky genes, and compound interest. Of those 3, he considers compound interest the most important. When one of the world's most successful investors credits compound interest as his secret weapon, perhaps it's worth paying attention. But these stories of millions and billions might feel as distant as tales from another planet. Let me bring compound interest closer to home with a story that might feel more familiar. Consider Sarah, a fictional teacher who started investing $200 a month when she was 25. Nothing dramatic, nothing that required her to eat ramen noodles for dinner or give up her morning coffee. Just $200 a month invested consistently, earning an average of 7% annually. By the time Sarah reached 65, those modest monthly contributions had grown to over $500,000. $500,000 from what amounted to less than the cost of a nice dinner out each month. That's compound interest turning ordinary discipline into extraordinary results. The beauty of Sarah's story is its accessibility. She didn't need to be brilliant, lucky, or particularly skilled. She simply needed to understand that consistent, modest efforts, given enough time, can create remarkable outcomes. What's particularly soothing about these real-world examples is that they demonstrate compound interest's democratic nature. It doesn't matter if you're a janitor, a secretary, a teacher, or a billionaire. The principles work exactly the same way. The only variables are time, consistency, and the rate of return. These stories also reveal something wonderfully comforting about compound interest. It rewards patience more than intelligence, consistency more than cleverness, and time more than timing. In a world that often seems to favor the quick and the flashy, compound interest quietly champions the steady and the persistent. As we listen to these stories, let yourself feel the gentle encouragement they offer. These weren't people with special access to secret investment strategies or insider information. They were ordinary people who understood something extraordinary. That time, combined with consistent effort, can transform modest beginnings into comfortable endings. The most reassuring part of these stories is that they're not unique. There are thousands of Ronald Reads and Grace Groners out there, people who've discovered that compound interest is perhaps the most reliable path to financial security ever invented. As we prepare to explore some of the common fears people have about compound interest, let these stories settle into your mind like a gentle reminder. If they could do it, so can you. The principles haven't changed, the mathematics remain the same, and the opportunity is as available today as it was when Ronald first started investing his janitor's wages. It's perfectly natural to feel a bit uncertain about compound interest. After all, if it were as simple and wonderful as I've been suggesting, wouldn't everyone be doing it? Let's lovingly dissolve these fears one by one, like sugar melting into warm tea. The first fear I hear most often sounds something like this: but what if I don't have enough money to start? This worry is as common as rain in Britain and just as unnecessary. The beautiful truth about compound interest is that it doesn't have a minimum wage requirement. It doesn't care if you start with $10 or $10,000. The principle works exactly the same way. Think of it this way. Compound interest is like a particularly patient gardener who's equally happy to tend a single flower pot or an entire botanical garden. The care and attention are the same, and the results are proportionally wonderful. A small garden may not feed an army, but it can certainly provide lovely herbs for your kitchen. I understand the mathematics of starting small can feel discouraging. After all, if you can only invest $25 a month, it might seem like you're trying to fill a swimming pool with a teaspoon. But here's the gentle truth, that $25 invested consistently over 30 years at a modest 7% return grows to over $60,000. That's compound interest turning pocket change into real financial security. Another fear that keeps people awake at night is this: what if I start too late? This worry is particularly poignant because it carries the weight of regret, the sense that opportunities have somehow slipped away like sand through fingers. But compound interest is remarkably forgiving about timing, rather like a friend who doesn't mind if you're fashionably late to dinner. Even if you're starting at 50 or 60, compound interest still works its gentle magic. Yes, you have fewer years for growth, but you likely have more money to invest than you did in your 20s. A 40-year-old investing $500 a month still accumulates nearly $400,000 by retirement. That's hardly a consolation prize. That's a substantial nest egg. The fear of complexity is another common visitor to worried minds. Compound interest sounds complicated, people whisper. What if I don't understand it well enough? This fear is rather like being afraid to enjoy a sunset because you don't understand astrophysics. The beauty works regardless of your technical knowledge. Compound interest is actually refreshingly simple in its operation. You invest money, it earns returns, those returns get reinvested, and the cycle continues. It's less like operating a space shuttle and more like planting a tree. You don't need to understand photosynthesis to enjoy the shade. Many people also worry about market volatility, imagining their compound interest journey as a terrifying roller coaster ride. This fear often sounds like, what if the market crashes and I lose everything? It's a perfectly reasonable concern, but it misunderstands how compound interest actually works over time. Markets do fluctuate. They go up and down rather like a busy yo-yo in the hands of an enthusiastic child. But compound interest is a long-term strategy, and over long periods, markets have historically trended upward. The crashes that make headlines are often just temporary detours on a longer journey toward growth. Think of market volatility as waves on the ocean. If you're in a small boat, those waves can feel quite dramatic. But if you're in a large, sturdy ship, which is what a long-term investment strategy resembles, those same waves are merely part of the natural rhythm of the sea. There's also the fear of making mistakes, of somehow doing it wrong. This worry whispers things like, what if I choose the wrong investments? Or what if I miss the best opportunities? But compound interest is wonderfully forgiving of imperfection. You don't need to be a financial genius to benefit from it. The truth is, the biggest mistake you can make with compound interest is not starting at all. A decent plan implemented consistently will almost always outperform a perfect plan that never gets started. It's rather like the difference between a leisurely walk that actually happens and a marathon that remains forever in the planning stages. Some people worry that compound interest is only for people who understand complicated financial instruments. They imagine they need to master options trading or cryptocurrency or some other exotic investment strategy. But the most effective compound interest strategies are often surprisingly mundane. Regular contributions to a diversified index fund, for instance, is about as exciting as watching paint dry and about as complicated as making toast. But it's also one of the most reliable ways to build wealth over time. Sometimes the most boring financial strategies are the most effective ones. Another common fear is the worry about inflation eating away at returns. What if my money grows, but everything becomes more expensive? This concern is valid, but it misunderstands how compound interest typically works. Good investments tend to grow faster than inflation over time, rather like a steady runner gradually pulling ahead of a persistent but slower competitor. The fear of commitment also visits many people. What if I need the money, they wonder? What if I can't keep investing consistently? But compound interest doesn't require perfection. It rewards consistency, but it doesn't punish the occasional interruption. Life happens, and good financial strategies account for that reality. Perhaps the most persistent fear is the simple worry that it's too good to be true. In a world full of financial scams and get-rich-quick schemes, compound interest's genuine effectiveness can seem suspicious. But compound interest isn't a scheme. It's a mathematical principle that's been working consistently for centuries. As we prepare to explore how you might begin your own compound interest journey, let these dissolved fears settle into a feeling of gentle confidence. Every person who's ever benefited from compound interest started exactly where you are now, with questions, concerns, and the simple willingness to begin. Compound interest isn't asking you to be fearless, it's asking you to be gently brave. There's a difference, and it's a difference that makes all the difference in the world. Now let's turn our attention to the most important person in this entire compound interest story, you. Not the abstract you of financial textbooks, but the real you, with your specific circumstances, your particular dreams, and your unique relationship with money. Take a moment to consider where you are right now in your financial journey. Perhaps you're someone who's been putting off investing because it felt too complicated, like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube while blindfolded. Or maybe you're already investing, but want to understand better how this magical process actually works. Wherever you find yourself, compound interest is ready to meet you exactly where you are. Let's imagine you're 25 years old, just starting your career, and you can manage to invest $100 a month. I know. When you're 25, $100 can feel like a significant chunk of your budget, possibly representing the choice between compound interest and actually having a social life. But here's the beautiful mathematics. That $100 a month, invested for 40 years at 7% annually, grows to over $800,000. $800,000 from what amounts to less than the cost of a nice dinner out each month. That's compound interest turning your morning coffee budget into a comfortable retirement. It's the kind of mathematics that makes you want to hug your calculator. But perhaps you're thinking, I'm not 25 anymore. I'm 35 or 45 or even 55. Have I missed my chance? This is where compound interest reveals its forgiving nature. Even if you're starting at 35 with that same $100 a month, you're still looking at nearly $400,000 by retirement. At 45, it's still over $200,000. These aren't consolation prizes. These are substantial amounts that can transform your financial future. Compound interest doesn't discriminate based on age. It simply adjusts its timeline accordingly. It's rather like a skilled chef who can create a wonderful meal whether you give them 4 hours or 40 minutes. The results are proportionally excellent. Now, maybe you're in a different situation altogether. Perhaps you're someone who can invest more than $100 a month, maybe $200 or $300 or even $500. If so, compound interest becomes even more generous with its gifts. $500 a month starting at 35 becomes nearly $2 million by retirement. That's compound interest turning disciplined saving into genuine wealth. But let's also acknowledge that not everyone can invest hundreds of dollars a month. Maybe you're a student, or you're supporting family members, or you're working in a job that doesn't leave much room for investment. Perhaps you can only manage $25 a month, or even just $10. Here's the gentle truth. Compound interest welcomes small contributions with the same enthusiasm it shows for large ones. $10 a month might not sound like much. It's less than most people spend on streaming services. But invested consistently over 30 years, it grows to over $12,000. That's compound interest turning loose change into a year of emergency expenses, or a down payment on a car, or simply the peace of mind that comes from having money set aside. The beauty of compound interest is that it scales perfectly to your situation. It doesn't judge your circumstances or compare your contributions to anyone else's. It simply takes whatever you can offer and multiplies it with the patient persistence of time. Let's talk about those of you who might be in different life stages. Perhaps you're a parent thinking about your children's education, or your own education for that matter. Starting a small investment account for a newborn, even just $25 a month, can grow to over $60,000 by the time they're 18. That's compound interest turning diaper money into college funding. Or maybe you're approaching retirement and thinking it's too late to benefit from compound interest. But even in retirement, compound interest continues to work. If you have money in retirement accounts, it can continue growing, providing you with increasing income over time. Compound interest doesn't retire just because you do. For those of you who are self-employed or have irregular income, compound interest can be particularly comforting. You don't need to invest the same amount every month. You can invest more when times are good and less when they're challenging. Compound interest is remarkably flexible about the timing of contributions, as long as the general trend is consistent. Here's something particularly encouraging. Compound interest doesn't require you to make perfect decisions. You don't need to time the market, pick the perfect stocks, or have any special financial expertise. A simple, diversified investment approach, something as straightforward as an index fund, is often the most effective way to harness compound interest's power. Think of compound interest as a forgiving friend who doesn't mind if you're not perfect. Did you forget to invest for a few months? No problem. Just start again when you can. Did you have to withdraw some money for an emergency? That's what money is for. Compound interest will patiently rebuild from whatever remains. The most important thing you can do for your compound interest journey is simply to begin. Not when you have more money, not when you understand investing better, not when the market conditions are perfect. Right now, with whatever you can afford, however small it might seem. Remember Ronald Read, the janitor who became a millionaire? He didn't wait for the perfect moment or the perfect amount. He simply started consistently with whatever he had. Grace Groner didn't become wealthy because she was a financial genius. She became wealthy because she understood that time was her greatest asset, and she was willing to let compound interest work its quiet magic. Your compound interest journey doesn't need to be dramatic or complicated. It can be as simple as setting up an automatic investment of whatever amount feels comfortable. $10, $50, $100, or whatever fits your budget. The key is consistency, not perfection. The most beautiful part of compound interest is that it meets you wherever you are and helps you get to wherever you want to go. It doesn't ask you to be someone else. It simply asks you to be consistently yourself. So let's gently bridge the gap between understanding compound interest and actually welcoming it into your life. This isn't about dramatic financial transformations or complicated investment strategies. It's about taking one small, comfortable step that honors both your current situation and your future dreams. The most beautiful aspect of beginning your compound interest journey is its simplicity. You don't need to research obscure investment vehicles or master complex financial theories. You don't need to wait for the perfect economic conditions or accumulate a large sum of money. You simply need to make one gentle decision. To start. If you're feeling ready to take that first step, here's what I'd suggest. Choose an amount that feels comfortable, not challenging, not stressful, but genuinely comfortable. This might be $10 a month or $50 or $100. The specific amount matters far less than your ability to invest it consistently without causing yourself financial stress. Think of this initial investment like planting a seed in a garden. You don't need to plant an entire forest on your first day. You just need to put one seed in the ground and water it regularly. That seed will grow into something beautiful, given time and consistent care. The easiest way to begin is often through what's called an index fund, a wonderfully boring investment that owns tiny pieces of hundreds or thousands of companies. It's like buying a small slice of the entire economy, which has historically grown steadily over time. Index funds are compound interest's best friend because they're simple, low cost, and designed for long-term growth. Most investment companies make it remarkably easy to set up automatic investing. You can arrange for a small amount to be transferred from your checking account to your investment account each month, as automatically as paying your phone bill. This removes the need to remember to invest. It simply happens quietly in the background of your life. What's particularly peaceful about this approach is that it removes the burden of timing. You don't need to worry about whether the market is high or low, whether it's a good time to buy or a bad time to invest. You simply invest consistently, month after month, and let compound interest smooth out the inevitable ups and downs. If you're employed, you might already have access to compound interest through your workplace retirement plan. Many employers offer matching contributions, which is essentially free money added to your compound interest journey. If your employer matches your retirement contributions, participating in this plan isn't just wise. It's like accepting a gift that keeps giving. For those of you who feel overwhelmed by investment choices, remember that simple often works better than complex. A basic diversified index fund is often more effective than elaborate investment strategies. It's the compound interest equivalent of a reliable, well-maintained garden rather than an exotic orchid that requires constant attention. The second gentle action I'd suggest is to automate your investment increases. Many investment platforms allow you to automatically increase your monthly investment by a small amount each year, perhaps $10 or $20. This helps your investments grow along with your income without requiring you to make conscious decisions about increasing your contributions. This approach is particularly comforting because it happens so gradually you barely notice it. It's like slowly adjusting the temperature in a room. The change is so subtle that you adapt without discomfort. But over time, the cumulative effect is significant. Remember that compound interest is a marathon, not a sprint. There will be months when your investments go down and months when they go up. This is perfectly normal and expected. The key is to keep your focus on the long-term journey rather than the daily fluctuations. It's rather like tending a garden through different seasons. Sometimes there will be storms that seem to damage your plants. But if the roots are strong and you continue to provide consistent care, spring always returns and growth resumes. As you begin your compound interest journey, be patient with yourself and with the process. The early years might feel slow, like watching grass grow or paint dry. But remember that compound interest is like a snowball. It starts small and slow, but gradually gains momentum until it becomes an unstoppable force. The most important thing you can do is to start, even if imperfectly. A modest investment plan that you actually follow is infinitely more valuable than a perfect plan that remains forever in the planning stages. Compound interest rewards action, not perfection. Give yourself permission to start small. Give yourself permission to make mistakes. Give yourself permission to learn as you go. Compound interest is remarkably forgiving of imperfection. It simply asks for consistency and time. As we prepare to close our gentle journey together, let yourself feel the quiet confidence that comes from understanding one of finance's most powerful principles. Compound interest isn't magic. It's mathematics. It's not luck. It's logic. It's not reserved for the wealthy. It's available to anyone with patience and persistence. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, let yourself imagine your money working quietly while you rest. Picture it growing slowly, steadily, like a tree adding rings year after year. Feel the peace that comes from knowing you've planted seeds that will grow into something beautiful, given time and care. Whether you take action tomorrow or next month, whether you start with $10 or $100, whether you're 25 or 65, compound interest will be there, ready to transform your patience into prosperity, your consistency into comfort, and your small beginnings into something wonderfully substantial. The most beautiful part of compound interest is that it asks so little and gives so much. It asks for patience in a world that prizes speed, consistency in a world that celebrates drama, and faith in a world that often rewards doubt. In return, it offers the quiet satisfaction of watching small efforts become significant results. Take a deep breath now and let this knowledge settle into your consciousness like a gentle blessing. You now understand one of the most powerful tools for building wealth ever discovered. You know how it works, you've seen it work for others, and you know it can work for you. Sweet dreams, and may your money grow as peacefully as you sleep. Until our next gentle financial lesson unfolds, this is The Sleeping Economist, reminding you that sometimes the best way to grow your wealth is to first find peace with money, and that peace begins with understanding. Sleep well and let your money work as peacefully as you rest.